I also found out years ago that it's also very dangerous to teach after you've had a Coke. Because then you need to burp in the middle of your talk and there's no place to go because the mic is right on your face. So today's topic is, the title is Who's Agent X? Proving that it's more reasonable to believe that God exists without using the Bible. Unfortunately, today will be the toughest topic that I will do, because I'm going to use science, and a lot of science. But if you get confused, which you may, you need to find a junior higher, and they will explain it to you. Because seriously, I'm going to talk about concepts that the junior higher is just like, oh yeah, of course. And they will honestly find a junior higher and say, talk to me, explain to me what the multiverse is. And they'll explain to you. Or go see the Marvel movies, which is another option to understand what the multiverse is. So today we are not going to use the Bible to prove that God exists. Why no Bible when proving God exists? Why is this important? Well, you can't easily use the Bible to prove the Bible. It can be circular reasoning. Now, I'm not saying it is circular reasoning, but it can be circular reasoning. But here's the problem. Most atheists will look at it and say, well, that's circular reasoning. Right. In fact, I once played a game. I did a little skit on stage, and somebody said, well, Neil, why don't you, and the person who was playing the other side said, well, Neil, you should just use the Bible. And I said, well, okay, so why should I use the Bible? He said, well, because God says the Bible is true. And I said, well, why should I believe that God exists, or why does I believe that that he believes the Bible is true? He said, well, because it says so in the Bible. I'm like, wait a minute. And I said, well, don't you see that that's circular reasoning? And she said, well, you just don't have faith. And she storms out. And everybody's like, oh. And then I said, okay, that was just a skit. Because the gal was sitting on the front seat when it happened. And she raised her hand and asked a question. But the point is that most atheists will say, well, that's their circular reasoning. And so you don't want to get into that. You want to pick the lowest hanging fruit, okay? The second thing I tell atheists, so atheists don't believe the Bible is true, so you can't start there. Imagine the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita, if you remember on Sunday, we said is a Hindu holy book. Imagine one day you're sitting at your favorite In-N-Out burger. They don't have them out here, do they? But they do. They do? Okay. And you're sitting there, and this guy in a saffron robe comes out, and he sits next to you, and he says, eating meat is murder. That only you should not be doing. Sorry, I should translate. It says, eating meat is murder. Eating meat is murder. That you should not be doing. And then you say, well, why? I don't think eating meat is murder. And he says, well, because the Bhagavad Gita says so. Now, you're going to say, oh, well, the Bhagavad Gita says so. Oh, my goodness. And you get up, and you take your burger, and you give it a very decent, honorable burial, right? No, you're like, I don't care what the Bhagavad Gita says. So when you go to an atheist or a Hindu or a Muslim, they're like, I don't care what the Bible says. So you got to start there. Are you trying to win the argument, or are you trying to win the person? And that's what we're doing, is we're trying to win the person, okay? And when I talk to atheists, I have to put this in. I say, we just don't know is not a valid alternative theory. A lot of times I'll present this entire argument, and an atheist says, well, we just don't know. No. You have to refute the existing evidence, right? Imagine you're in court. The prosecution says the murderer was identified as the defendant. Witnesses said the murderer had blue eyes, dark hair, and a scar. The defendant had a motive, an opportunity, and we found a still-smoking gun in the car. Then the defense stands up and says, we can't conclude that, Your Honor. Maybe aliens did it. We just don't know. That's not going to work. You have to refute the existing data and show why it's not valid or insufficient evidence, not complain, we don't know. You have to show me why I am wrong or why my argument is insufficient. And that's something a lot of Christians forget they can do. Oftentimes I'll be in an argument and they'll say, well, that's you're just bigoted, or you're just homophobic, or you're just transphobic. I'm like, I may be transphobic, I may be bigoted, I may be everything you say, but that does not refute my argument. There's only two ways to refute an argument. You have to show the facts are wrong or the logic is wrong. There is no other way to refute an argument, because even if a Nazi says 1 + 1 is equal to 2, it's still 2. So maybe I'm a Nazi, but that doesn't disprove my argument. If you want to disprove my argument, you have to show the facts are wrong or the logic is wrong. Otherwise, you're just calling me names, which, by the way, is called an ad hominem fallacy. An ad hominem fallacy means is when you insult the man. right? To the man, ad hominem. Okay, the next thing is the case has to be taken in entirety. I've presented this case on a couple of TV shows. I've presented it on a whole bunch of radio shows, and I've presented it in a bunch of colleges. And they'll take one piece of what I said and says, that's wrong. No. You have to take the entire case. Any single point may not be sufficient and may have alternative explanations. Somebody threw the gun in the car. Other people have blue eyes. The victim had other enemies. But when you add them all, blue eyes, scar, motive, opportunity, gun, then the entire case has explanatory power, and any jury in the world would find it reasonable evidence to convict without a reasonable doubt. Okay? So that's the introduction I give to atheists when I do this talk, and you guys should know it because hopefully you'll be able. Now, I don't expect you to repeat all this. We do have the book, Who's Agent X? I have a few copies out in the car. They're $10 if you want it. But it goes through in much more detail, right? So, and the best thing is give it to an atheist and say, if you disagree, email Neil. His name is in the front. His email is in the front. You don't need to own the argument. You know? And in fact, whenever you present this argument, you should present it. In fact, I teach a whole class. We don't have time to go through that. It's called the Columbo tactic, made famous by a friend of mine named Greg Koukl. And Columbo, you guys all know who Columbo was, right? Columbo was this bumbling detective, right? And he just says, I just kind of, something about this baffles me, right? And he walks around looking like a really silly, uninformed, kind of clueless detective. But he's cunning, right? So he asked a question. He says, something about this bothers me. Like when this happened, were you outside or inside? And he'll ask a question, right? So in the same way, when somebody starts to attack you, you just say, no, I don't know all this stuff, I just want to know, and then you ask a question. So when you present, you just say, and at the end of this, you'll have a whole bunch of questions. Like you'll say, well, where did the universe come from? And then you don't need to answer the question because you asked the question. You didn't provide an answer. The minute you say, well, the universe was created by God, well, guess what? You are now put on the spot. You have to answer it all. You don't need to do that. You just ask questions. And if your questions are embarrassing enough, they'll back off, right? Okay. Or embarrassing them enough. Okay. So this talk will be a bit technical. You'll hear a few concepts that may dazzle your mind. But here's the deal. As I said, it's a technical talk, and I'm going to give you technical concepts. So if you get lost, which is fine, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I've had years going over this. I developed this talk back in 2007 or something like that. So I've had years with it. So to me, it's familiar. But if you lose me in some place, I'm going to give you 4 major points that conclude things. If you understand that there is evidence to get to that point, then you're fine. And then you can always go back to the book and find the evidence or go back to the argument. But the key is I want you to understand that there are valid solid blah. So sync up with me at each step's conclusion, okay? Now, as I said, this is the most complicated talk, so I don't want you to run away. Next week or the 2 weeks from now when I come back, it's all history. We're not talking about science, so don't be like, oh, I couldn't follow that talk. Well, the next one you'll be fine, right? So don't worry about it. Because I've had people go, it was too much for me. It blew my mind. This talk will blow my mind, your mind. Okay? But I want you to stick with me. Okay. So, quick question. If the Bible is true, what is the greatest miracle ever? Creation, right? Creation is the biggest miracle. The creation story in Genesis. Why? Because if this is true, then every other miracle in the Bible is plausible and possible and probable. Right? If God can create everything from nothing, he can easily bring somebody back to life. Yeah? He can easily do a virgin birth. By the way, I got in an argument with an atheist a few years ago, and he was like, oh, so you believe in the virgin birth? I said, yep, so do you. He goes, no, I don't. I said, absolutely, you believe in virgin birth? It happens all the time. He goes, no, I don't. I'm like, yeah, you do. You ever heard of artificial insemination? Test tube babies? He looks at me like, well, that's not what he's talking about. I'm like, how do you know? And then I said, so you're thinking that God who created the universe doesn't know how to handle a measly virgin birth when we humans can do it? And he's like, oh. But he wouldn't agree that he accepts the virgin birth. But hey, that's fine. Okay, so now, can the supernatural happen? Is there a supernatural, right? If you don't believe the supernatural can happen, you'll never believe any of the Bible's claims, especially not the resurrection. But after today, after the series, you will not be able to say there is no supernatural and be scientifically correct, because I am going to give you a scientific case for the supernatural that almost every scientist today accepts and can't refute. Okay? Okay. What we'll cover today. Where did the universe come from? What can we derive about the cause of the universe from science? Notice we're using from science, not from the Bible. Okay? Now, this is what I told you. I jumped ahead. Logic 101, there are only two ways to refute an argument. Prove either the facts are wrong or incomplete, or B, the logic is wrong. By the way, all this stuff is in the book. And we even have a book of slides. I didn't bring any with me, but we do have it online if you go to Amazon. Okay. So, the other thing is we don't need 100% proof. We just want to find the most reasonable answer to this question. Remember, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, right? We're not looking for 100% proof. We're not looking for direct evidence. We're looking for circumstantial evidence, right? As my friend Jay Warner says, 90% of all murder cases are solved by circumstantial evidence, not through direct evidence. In case you didn't know that. Okay, so as I said, today we're going to talk about a few things that might dazzle your mind, but I want to set something, since you guys aren't into the Marvel universe. I had the slide before they came out with that movie, but this is the Earth. I'm going to be talking about other universes. A lot of people, when I talk about other universes, they get confused where those other universes are. So, the other universe is not, this is our solar system, right? The Earth's in the solar system. The solar system is in what galaxy? Milky Way galaxy. You know what the word galaxy means? It means milk. So we're in the Milky Way milk. So we call it the Milky Way galaxy, but it should be just called galaxy, right? The galaxy. Anyway, so the Milky Way galaxy is in the local group. The local group is in the local supercluster. The local supercluster is in the universe. So when I talk about other universes, I'm not talking about our universe. I'm not talking about any of those things in between. It's not somewhere where you can see. It's another universe. It's not part of our universe. It came into being separately, independently. It doesn't intersect or interact or interfere with our universe. It's out there somewhere. Okay? So you're like, wow. Now, if you watch the Marvel movies, you're like, oh, look, yeah, there are other universes. In fact, they have the Spider-Man into the multiverse, Spider-Man into the, and all that stuff, right? So kids are very familiar with this. My sons are like, oh, yeah, of course. My son says, oh, yeah, of course, yeah. And he can even discuss issues about the multiverse. But so there are the discussion we're going to have is other universes. Okay. Let's start. This is the first point. Remember I said there are 4 major points. The first point is that the universe is not eternal. 80 years ago, atheists said, everything which has a beginning has a cause, and anything that existed forever needs no cause. Let me say that again. Everything which has a beginning has a cause, and anything that existed forever needs no cause. Okay? Now, let me explain that, because this should be obvious. It should be self-evident. Why? Because if something has existed forever, can anything come before it? No. There was no point at which it did not exist. There was nothing that precedes it. Nothing can come before it. So if nothing can come before it, nothing could have caused it, because to cause something, you have to precede it causally, in causation, or temporally, in time. Right? So, scientists and philosophers agree that anything that existed forever needs no cause. Atheists agree with this. Okay? Now, the second thing atheists said is the universe had no beginning and existed forever. Right? That's what they said. Not most people don't know that. That's what they said. And therefore, they said the universe needs what? No cause, because the universe has existed forever. Now, this, by the way, is very similar in what the theists said. The theists said, everything, that's the Christians, the believers in God, said everything which has a beginning has a cause, and anything that existed forever needs no cause. Exactly the same as what they said. But when we got to the second point, did we say the universe had no beginning and existed forever? No, because we'd read Genesis 1, and so we said, no, God had no beginning and existed forever. So far, so good? So if God had no beginning, exists for, therefore, who needs no cause? God needs no cause, right? See, this is logical. Now, atheists today, a lot of atheists today will go, well, where did God come from? Like, well, no, he was eternal. He existed forever, so he needs no cause. And they'll go, what do you mean not? Well, let me explain. 80 years ago, atheists thought the universe existed forever, and therefore they argued it needs no cause. Now, you saying those atheists were idiots? Because that's a very unscientific thing to say, that anything that exists forever needs a cause. It's very unscientific. I always play that game. I never thought that I'd hear an atheist saying such an unscientific thing. They say it all the time, but that's fine. But, we'll play the game, right? So this, by the way, is called the cosmological argument. Okay? And as I'll develop it. By the way, it's very important that you understand that this is the cosmological, because I've had people talk about this, and they called it the cosmological argument. The cosmological argument is completely different. This is how the cosmological argument goes. Everyone who needs a hairdresser has hair. And anyone that has no hair needs no hairdresser. Okay? The second point of the cosmological argument is that Gandhi has no hair. So the conclusion for the cosmological argument is, therefore, Gandhi needs no hairdresser. Just in case you ever confuse the two. Anyway, so this is where we were at 80 years ago. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. Anything that exists forever needs no cause. The atheist said the universe had no beginning and existed forever, therefore the universe needs no cause. There was a priest named George Lemaitre. He was a scientist and a monk of sorts. And he came up with a theory that everybody mocked. And they mocked it for a while, and they made fun of it because the theory said the universe had a beginning. And the atheists hated it. And then this guy, Hubble, showed up. Hubble was down in L.A. This is before L.A. was light polluted, and he was using the Hooker telescope. Somebody said, was he using the Hubble telescope? No, we called the Hubble telescope because of Hubble, who was using the Hooker telescope. Got that? Okay, great. Now, so Hubble is looking at through the Hooker telescope, he's looking at all the different galaxies. Now, we're talking galaxies, not universe, galaxies. He's looking at all the different galaxies, and he knows that some galaxies, based on the chemical content of that, should have a certain color. And he notices that the galaxies that are further away are redder than they should be. And he goes, that's kind of weird. So he looks over, he goes to the other side of the universe, and he looks at the other side of the earth and goes, oh, wait, any galaxy that's further away from us seems to be red. In fact, the further out they are, the redder they are. It's like, well, that's kind of weird. And he starts thinking about this, and then he realizes what's happening. He is seeing the Doppler shift. Now, the Doppler shift in cars is you're standing on the side of the road, and a car comes towards you, and it sounds like this. Now, is a car changing its sound? No. The sound that the car is making is probably what it sounded like when it was right next to you, right? So what's happening is as each sound wave, as the car comes towards you, each sound front is closer than the last one, so it looks like it has a shorter wavelength, so it goes up in pitch. As the car leaves and leaves you behind, each sound front is further than the other one, so it sounds like it has a lower pitch. That's the Doppler shift in cars. Hubble realized he was seeing the Doppler shift not in cars, but in stars. He realized that he was seeing a redshift. In fact, these galaxies that he was looking at were moving so fast away from us, almost close to the speed of light, that their color was changing. Not their sound, but their color was changing because they were moving. And he looked all around, and he realized, something's happening here. And he invites Einstein to come over. And Einstein, in the past, had looked at George Lemaitre's theory and said, that doesn't work at all. And he'd added a little fudge factor into these equations. He said the universe is constant. It's always been the same. It's always been there forever. And Hubble shows this to him. And Hubble says, something, Einstein doesn't say it that way, but he says, the universe is what? Expanding. Oh, no. Because if the universe is expanding, then if it is expanding, that means it is expanding from something. And if it's expanding from something, it can't be infinitely old, or it would have finished expanding eons ago, and we'd see nothing but fuzzy light out there. I mean, if these things have been moving at the speed of light for the last infinite number of years, we'd look out there and we'd see nothing. Maybe our own galaxy, but nothing else. Not even our own galaxy, probably just our own solar system, because the galaxy is kind of expanding. Well, they said, well, the universe is expanding. We can work backwards. We can start calculating. And if we take the speed of light to be constant, which is an argument, if we take the speed of light to be a constant and we start working back, we can calculate at what point did it start expanding. And so they did that. They said, calculations show that the universe, light, matter, and everything suddenly came into being with a big bang about 13.7 billion years ago. Before the bang, we have something called the singularity. This is the point at which matter and time start to exist. Now, this is very important. If the speed of light is constant, then that number is correct. If the speed of light is not constant, or there's some other factors on it, then that 13.7 is not accurate. But we're not going to worry about that. Right now, what we're going to worry about is this is the other thing that Einstein's equation showed us. Einstein showed us that at that calculation, at the point of the universe, that there's really nothing like space and time. It's a single thing called space-time. And guess what? They figured out that you can't have matter. If you have matter, you need time. If you have time, you need energy. If you have energy, you need matter. You can't have one without the other. Matter needs time, needs energy, needs time, needs matter, needs energy. They're all interbound. And if you take Einstein's equations, if you zero out one of them, the whole equation blows up or becomes undefined or goes to zero. You can't have matter without time. You can't have time without energy. You can't have energy without matter. They're all tied together. Houston, we have a problem. Everything which has a beginning has a cause. Anything that existed forever needs no cause. Number one in the atheist premise. Number two in the atheist premise, the universe has, the universe has no beginning? No. The universe had a beginning, has not existed forever. Therefore, number three, the universe needs what? It needs a cause. Oh, were the atheists upset? Oh, they were really upset. They were like, well, this is a stupid theory. We're going to kick people out of university. Anybody, in fact, Frederick Hoyle, one of the biggest astrophysicists, said, this stupid Big Bang theory, and he called it the Big Bang, mocking it because these Christian George Lemaitre would actually come up with this theory, and it was standing for, and then Hubble, so he fought it. He goes, no, with space is being, he came up with like 50 other theories. He never accepted the Big Bang, except towards the end of his life. But he was upset. In fact, they started kicking people out of colleges who accepted the Big Bang. You have Big Bang? Oh, we don't want you. You're not going to get tenure here. It was hated, mocked, until Hubble shows up. And they said, oh, we have a problem here, guys. Why did they hate the Big Bang so much? Because it meant something had to cause the universe. So they said, well, maybe the universe created itself. Can something do something before it exists? Can the universe create itself? No, which is nonsense. So that fell away right away. But that was the first suggestion. Maybe the universe created. In fact, he came back years later with Stephen Hawking. He goes, oh, yeah, the universe created itself. Like, yeah, right. In your dreams, buddy. Socrates told us that nothing can create itself. In fact, Socrates said that if anything exists, because nothing can create itself, and because anything that begins to exist needs a cause, so if anything exists, something must have existed forever. And it's funny when I talk to atheists nowadays, they have never had any philosophy. And you quote Socrates to them, they're like, and then they'll say something like this, well, we don't need philosophy. I'm like, yeah? Is that your philosophy? Because you know what a PhD is. It's a degree in philosophy. You know if science has a philosophy? You don't need the philosophy of science. You know what the philosophy of science is? It's called the scientific method. It's called the repeatability. You don't need any of that. That sounds like a peasant arguing with me, buddy. I'm nicer when I say that. I say it in the Columbo way. Even I'm just kind of confused. You see, that's, the peasants thought that science was stupid. But, science has philosophy behind it. Without philosophy of science, we can't do science. So I'm just confused. Are you scientific? Or are you one of those unscientific types? No. Okay, fine. Well, let's get back to the argument then. Okay. So now the atheist says, well, okay, fine. well, maybe we can push the problem back. So what? By the way, all the pictures are real nebulas and cosmology pictures from different telescopes. They just say, now what? We grant you the universe had a beginning, but what gave rise to the beginning? The universe had no beginning. We're just going to push the problem back. Hyperspace of some unknown subatomic quantum agent that existed forever, the cause, that created the singularity. That existed forever agent is some unknown object. Atheists say some agent created the universe. My atheist friends don't like the word God. So, we will call the cause agent X. It's an agent, some agent, unknown agent. Agent X caused the universe. Right? So our job today is to go out there, put on our detective hats or spy hunting hats, and find out who or what is agent X. Everybody with me? Now, it turns out that we can do a lot of things with explosions. This massive explosion that started the universe and exploded, we can go in and we can look at the debris that comes from an explosion and see if we can figure out who set off the explosion. So that's what we're going to do. There are two things that we know, as any good detective would say, would do. They'd get a big piece of paper and they'd write down all the characteristics, red hair, green eyes, very beautiful. Oh, no, that's my wife. Things like that. You write things down and then you figure out who they are. Okay, so we're going to write down. There's two things we know about Agent X, right? One, it's powerful enough to create a universe, right? I mean, that's obvious. Well, that's number one. Okay, number two is it exists forever without a cause because it caused the universe, right? It caused time. It created time. So it can't be anything. If it created time, it has to be outside of time, right? So it has to be existing forever. And it can't have anything that caused it. Now, somebody say, what if something caused it? Well, no, you're forgetting about time. Time was created. You don't have any time to go back, right? Okay, fine. So we know two things. Let's do a little primer here. You guys all know about infinity. The symbol for infinity is that, right? So let's subtract with infinity. Infinity minus 1 is equal to infinity. Some people are looking at me suspicious. That's too easy. Okay, infinity minus 1 billion is equal to infinity. Okay, now you notice I don't put infinity minus infinity because that's undefined. We don't know what that means, right? Science will accept that. Okay, so let's look at dividing with infinity. Infinity divided by 1 equal infinity. Infinity divided by 1 billion, infinity. Okay. And again, we don't divide by infinity because infinity divided by infinity is undefined. So this, by the way, the next proof I'm going to give you is the most complicated proof of the night of the presentation. So if you don't get it, don't worry about it. You can always go back to it because I know I've lost people on this one. I got lost on this one. It took me a few months to figure it out. Okay, and then to explain it. The atheists claim that there is no evidence that a God did this. Agent X, they say, could be something mindless like a quantum fluctuation. Okay? Now, by the way, you can't have a quantum fluctuation without time. But we'll grant them this just for now. But the first time somebody says, well, it could be a quantum fluctuation. I'm like, what's it fluctuating in? Matter? And how do you know it's fluctuating if you don't have time? Oh, okay. Never mind. Okay, but okay, we'll grant them this for this exercise. But here's the thing: they have a quantum fluctuation. If you have something like a quantum fluctuation, it can do two things. It's going to create a universe. It's going to create a universe. It can do one of two things. The fluctuation is going to make only one universe and then stop. Or two, the fluctuation is going to make universes on a regular basis. Right? It can't do anything else because it doesn't have a mind. Right? So he is going to do it once. And think of a printer. Forget how it came to be, but it's stopped working, or it's crazy, right? It's either going to print one piece of paper and then stop, or it's just going to be printing hundreds of papers. It's just like, stop, you're wasting all my paper, right? It's just printing randomly because it's crazy. It's gone mad. There's no computer behind it. It's just printing, right? So it can't do anything else because it has no mind. It's what we call mechanistic. It's mechanistic. It's a machine. It has no mind. Okay, so that is the option. So Here's where it gets difficult, but pay attention. Let's look at option 1. This is the universe causality line. You can think of it as a timeline, but it's really a causality timeline. Eternity passes somewhere there off their back face. If something with no free will and no mind, like a mechanistic fluctuation, existed for all infinity outside of time and was going to create one universe, when would it have created that one universe? Okay? And right? Here's our time. It would be eternity ago. See, that's what we are. Universe supposedly 13.7. Remember, I'm arguing with atheists. I'm going to give them their numbers they want. Here's our universe created supposedly 13.7 billion years ago. But if something with no mind had created something in all infinity, how long ago would it have created that? Now let's think through this. If it was going to create something and the conditions for it to create that universe already existed, then it would have done it. Here's how you can think about it. By the way, the universe is not eternally old, nor is it everlasting. Here's how you think about it. It can be plausibly argued that the cause of the universe was to be a personal creator. William Ray Craig, a great debater, says, for how else could a temporal effect arise from an eternal cause? For example, if the cause of waters being frozen is the temperatures being below 0 degrees, then if the temperature were below 0 degrees from eternity, then any water present would be frozen from eternity. Right? Because it's not like the water will say, oh, I know it's freezing, but I don't feel like freezing. I'm just going to wait for, now I'll do it. It's just going to do it. And if that happened, it would have happened eternity ago. Everybody with me? Now, the only way to have an eternal cause but a temporal effect, that's an effect in time, would seem to be if the cause is a personal agent who freely chooses to create an effect in time. For example, a man sitting from eternity may will to stand up. Hence, a temporal effect may arise from an eternally existing agent. Make sense? What he's saying is you can't have a mechanistic cause create something yesterday or a few years ago. It has to have been eternity ago if it's going to create only one thing. Okay? So now some atheists will say, well, what about collapsing, expanding universes? What if that universe collapsed and expanded years ago and it's just doing this? So it was created infinitely ago, but it's just doing it over and over again. And the last time it did was 13.7 billion years ago. Well, if our universe kept collapsing and expanding after each cycle, residual energy would be left over. We'd be able to measure it, but we don't see any. So scientific evidence is against this. I know some of you in this room are saying, well, Neil, what about loop quantum cosmology? Don't worry, I'll take care of that, okay? Just get off my case. Okay, so number 1 doesn't work. Number 2. Let's look at option 2. Fluctuation is going to make universes on a regular basis. So there's your universal causality line. If something with no free will, no mind, like a mechanistic quantum fluctuation, and by the way, that was the example of taking infinity minus anything, is still infinity. Okay, so this one we're going to divide. So something with no free will and no mind, like a mechanistic quantum fluctuation, existed for all infinity outside time, was going to create more than one universe. So there's today. And it was going to make a universe. Let's say it's going to make a universe every billion years. How many universes would there be? What if it was going to create a universe every gazillion years? How many universes would there be? What if it was one universe in 1 year, and then another universe in a billion years, another universe in 2 billion years, another in 3 billion years? How many universes would there be? Infinity. Right? There would be infinite universes right now. And this is why I talked about infinite universes. Now, infinite universes covers new quantum cosmology. For those of you who are going to argue with me, it covers atemporal cosmology. Atemporal means outside of time. Each of the infinite universes are created at the same non-time. Because you have trouble thinking of non-time in a causality line. So they'll all be caused at the same time in a non-time. It covers bud, fractal, spontaneously generated, randomly generated, quantum, and sequential universes. It covers diminishingly small universes. It covers all the Marvel universes. Right? All the Spider-Man universe, all the movie universes is all covered in that because you'd have infinite universes. So the question is that the atheist says, but are there multiple or infinite universes? It's called a multiverse, by the way. But we can't use a multiverse. We have to have an infiniverse. So it's not just a multiverse we're looking for. We're looking for infinite universes. Why? Because this is going to happen over and over again. Well, there's no evidence for this. Are there multiverses? You can't see them, you can't touch them, you can't smell them, you can't hear them, you can't calculate, you can't measure any of the effects of these universes. Now, does that sound familiar? the argument that there are infinite universes, and yet the response is, wait, you can't see, touch, smell. Isn't this the problem that the atheists had with God? You can't see God, you can't touch him, you can't calculate him, right? Now, this is the argument they have. Now, we don't agree with those arguments, that's fine. But why the sudden change in standards? Now they're arguing for infinite universes. I call this blind faith. And my motto is no blind faith, right? Now, I have to tell you a funny story. I had a young man. He was part of an organization called Live Action. They would go undercover into Planned Parenthood's clinics, and they would tape them and show that they were violating every law, and they were also helping trafficking and all that. So, and the founder was Lila Rose. We were close friends with the family. So he was working with them, and he comes to me and says, I'm going to have this debate with my friend. He's an atheist. I said, oh, great. He says, can you advertise it? I said, yeah, sure. So I sent out, and we had a bunch of people who said they were interested, about 90 people. And then on a week before the debate, he says, my friend was really upset. He said, I just thought it was like between 4 or 5 of us. And now there are 90 people coming. He doesn't want to do it anymore. Do you know anyone else who'll debate me? I'm like, well, yeah, I know some grumpy old atheists but they're all like in their 50s. I mean, the only one I said, why don't you call the Atheist Society, the Silicon Valley Atheist Society, and have, see if they can recommend a student to debate you. So he goes, great. He calls me back 10 minutes later. He says, oh, yeah, the president of the Silicon Valley Atheist Society is going to debate me. I'm like, he's 50 years old. Can't he send you? He goes, no, I got it handled. I said, are you sure? He says, yeah, I got it. So he goes in there, and he uses the techniques used by William Lane Craig, right, in the debate. And he blows the guy away. I mean, destroys the guy completely. In fact, at one point during the Q&A, somebody says, because they'd all heard my talk before, I mean, the Christians had, or the few Christians that were organizing it. And so this question came up. Don't you realize that the only possible solution to your being an atheist is that there has to be infinite universes? He goes, but there are infinite universes. And they're like, what's the evidence? No, you have to believe me. And the guy asking the question, who strangely enough is now living in Idaho, because she moved here, a good friend of mine, she said, I'm sorry, isn't that blind faith? Which is exactly what it is. You've got to have infinite universes if you're going to be an atheist. You really have no other option. But here's the problem with infinite universes. It has weird consequences. That means there are almost infinite yous out there watching the same presentation with me, and there will be almost infinite yous over and over and over. Every single possible combination of universes happened, right? Every single, and some of them are identical to this, some are slightly different, somewhere you made a different choice, somewhere you made, it's just slightly different in many ways, or completely different. In some universes, there's no humans. In some universes, there's no animals. Some universes, there's no universe, right? So, and it just becomes over and over and over, just you over again in multiple different ways. And some of them, you have a beard. In fact, there's a universe where wherever you toss a coin, it always comes up heads, even if you do it 1 billion times in a row. There's a universe where you're the one giving the presentation to me, and I'm sitting in the same row that you are. But there's a problem with this that goes a step further. Atheists don't buy the infinite universe. Let's say we're playing poker. Suddenly you realize I got 10 royal flushes in a row, which is good, apparently. I don't play poker. When you jump out and shout, you're cheating, I say, not at all. We're just in that one universe where I just always happen to get a royal flush. Would you buy that? Would you think it's reasonable? Then why do you think this is reasonable? It makes no logical sense that you would buy this unreasonable thinking. And then a guy named 3 atheists came and destroyed the chances of infinite universes. This guy, Arvin Bord, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin came up, they did some calculations, and they found that even the infinite verse doesn't solve your problem because inflationary spacetimes are not past complete. That means all universe would have to collapse into one universe, which is the beginning universe. And we might be in it, we may not be into it, but you still need a beginning creator for that. All of them are still atheists. But the calculations show that this doesn't make sense. So what do you got through? You're left with one. that item option 2 doesn't work. So the first cause must be non-mechanistic. It must have what? A free will. Now, mechanistic things like gravity, physics, and chemistry do the same things over and over again. They can't suddenly decide to do something different. Right? Neil deGrasse Tyson is he's less atheistic now. he actually admitted he wasn't actually, I should correct that, who often passively aggressively mocks Christianity. In this video, he's a very brilliant guy, by the way. He explains things really well. In this video, he explains why you can trust something mechanistic like the laws of science to do the same thing over and over again. He releases a heavy ball on a chain and knows that it won't swing back far enough to hit him, so he doesn't flinch when it swings back. But remember, things are different if there's a non-mechanistic and free will agent on the other side.
So why didn't I flinch? Because the laws of science differ fundamentally from those of...
Sorry, yeah, that was obviously edited, but it was so funny that we had to watch it twice.
So why didn't I flinch? Because the laws of science differ fundamentally from those of...
See, if there is a non-mechanistic free agent outside of time and space, everything falls apart. Okay, so what do we know? The third thing we know is that it's a non-mechanistic agent, right? Okay. Now, at this point we should talk about, does the Big Bang contradict Genesis? Because I have a lot of people who worry about this and are concerned about this. Well, let's see what 3 atheists say about the Big Bang. Arno Penzias, the best data we have concerning the Big Bang are exactly what these are Nobel-winning atheists, by the way, are exactly what I would have predicted had I had nothing to go on but the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible as a whole. Robert Wilson, certainly there was something that set it all off. I can't think of a better theory of the origin of the universe to match Genesis. And then George Smoot, there is no doubt that a parallel exists between the Big Bang as an event and the atheist notion of creation out of nothing. So here's what you have to remember. Here's some notes. 1, the Big Bang is not a good name. The big controlled explosion would be accurate. Right? Remember, the Big Bang is not equal to evolution. I'll talk about it just in a minute. The Big Bang describes something identical to the Big Bang. The Bible describes something identical to the Big Bang. The Bible does not say evolution happened. These are 2 separate issues. Evolution is a theory in crisis today. Though there's some big pushback, the Big Bang is not. Evolution is falling apart daily. If you go to, in fact, and I'll show you some other issues, there turns out there are 14 Big Bangs that atheists have trouble with, and I'll tell you what they are. So evolution is dying, and you go there. The origin of life they have problems with. Speciation they have problems with. The Cambrian explosion has always been a problem for them. In fact, there are atheists who have abandoned evolution, and one of them actually I read his book. It was called Michael Denton is the name. It was called Evolution: A Theory in Crisis. He wrote this in 1980. And I met him, and I had marked up his entire book. I met him in 2000 and something, and he was working with the Discovery Institute. And I said, so I've been reading your stuff. How can you still be an atheist? He says, I may not be, but I can't tell anyone. And let me tell you why. It was very good. He says, the minute I publish as a theist, none of my work counts. It's better for the world to think I'm an atheist as I continue to publish this stuff. And he was publishing all these refutations and disproof of evolution, how it fell apart. Okay, so Big Bang is not equal to evolution. The Big Bang was conceived of by a Catholic monk. The atheists hated it and tried to kill it. It was mocked, which is why it's called the Big Bang. They fought in universities so they could not deny it scientifically. It's the greatest scientific proof for God as we see. It's the strongest weapon against bad science and evolution. Okay, so if you're witnessing to an atheist, remember, time dilation, you're like, well, 6 days, 13. Well, don't argue with that with an atheist. This is not a hill you want him to die on. And I mean literally go to hell on, okay? If you want to argue about 6 days, wait until he's saved. Then argue with him about it. Go for it. It's fun, right? But wait until he's saved. 2, if you think there's a number of reasons why the 13.7 billion years could be to be recalculated. 1, the speed of light could be not constant, or it could be varying, different things. If you look at this, the outer edge, when the Big Bang happened, the outer edge of the universe is expanding. It's still expanding today, by the way. Right? It's expanding faster than the speed of light, or close to the speed of light. If the outer edge is expanding close to the speed of light, time slows down for you when you travel at the speed of light relative to someone not moving at the center. So if I stay here and you go on a trip to, let's say, Ceti Alpha 4, right? Or Alpha Centauri. I think Ceti Alpha 4 is a place from Star Trek. But anyway, you go Alpha Centauri and you come back at the speed of light. For you, maybe days will have passed, right? But for me, I'll be dead because it'll be centuries and centuries, right? So the person who's traveling at the speed of light, time slows down. So if you're out, if the book of Genesis is written from God's perspective, then time is slowed down at the end, and you could actually calculate what the speed of light of the outer universe would be if that was the case. Again, we don't know. So the other thing is people argue about eons versus days. Again, this is a family argument. Have fun at it, but it doesn't change the difference. But most importantly, don't get hung up on the 6 days versus 6 eons. That's a family argument. Don't get stuck with trying to disprove evolution either. I spent days, that book I told you about, I would spend months researching evolution, arguing with evolutionists, coming up with rebuttals, and then some new scientists would come up with a new theory. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I had to start all over again. So I'm like, that's just too much work. So I just abandoned that and I focused on this. And this is so much easier because the Big Bang Theory is not changing every day, unlike evolution. And it's been proven to be true. Evolution is like, oh yeah, well maybe this doesn't work. Oh, let's try this, let's try this. They don't know what they're doing because they're wrong. But hey, so the next thing is don't start trying to prove the Bible is accurate. Save that for next, right? We'll do that next time we meet when I'm back, not this week, but not next week or the week after that. But don't try to prove the Bible is accurate. If there is no God, who cares what the Bible says? Right? First prove where God exists, then move on to the Bible. Now, he may not accept that the Bible exists. But I've had this argument when I say, look, I'm going to move on to the Bible, proving the Bible's true. He says, well, we don't know the God exists. I said, well, you got to make up your mind. I've shown you the evidence. I'm going to move on. But for the argument, will you grant me that if God exists, let's look at the Bible, right? So, and a lot of times I say, fine, because they don't think I can go the next step. Okay, so you first want to prove God exists. It's easy enough using the data the atheist already accepts to do that. Notice I've not used any data the atheist doesn't accept. Okay, let's keep going. So that was the first point, the universe is not eternal. The second point, it is fine-tuned. Okay, what does that mean? Well, besides having a beginning, there are 3 other factors we've noticed. The fine-tuned. The Big Bang is so fine-tuned that even slight variations would cause instability or collapse or destroy the universe or not allow life. Okay, let me explain that. This is the ratio of electrons to protons, right? The ratio of electrons to protons is almost the same, but if they had changed by 10 to the minus 37th, and the fact there was a tiny amount more protons. There are more electrons than there are protons, but if there had been a tiny bit more or a tiny bit less, or if they'd been exactly equal, then we would have no stars or planets. Okay, let me explain what that number, 10 to the minus 37, means. That's what it means. Imagine using a recipe that used 286 million billion pounds of sugar. That's equivalent to all the grains of sand on 100 million Earths. But it was so sensitive that if you added one more grain of sugar than that exact amount, the whole cake would fall flat or explode or kill anyone who ate it. Okay? So 1 grain of sand extra in the exact number of grains of sand in 100 million Earths. That tiny change would mean we'd have no electrons or protons. We'd have no stars or planets. Let's look at the next one. Electromagnetic force, the ratio of electromagnetic force to gravity. If it had changed in 10 to the minus 40, the stars would burn up too fast or no heavy elements. Expansion rate of the universe. If that had changed in 10 to the minus 55, we'd have no galaxies. The mass of the universe. If the mass of the universe had changed by 10 to the minus 59, stars would burn too rapidly for life, insufficient helium, and you would have no heavy elements. There's a few hundred of these. I've just shown you 4, right? Now let's look at that. The first one is the 1 grain of sand in 100 million Earths. The second one is 1 grain of sand difference in 100 billion Earths. The third one is 1 grain of sand in 10 trillion Earths. And the fourth one is 1 grain of sand in 100,000 trillion Earths. These are constants of the universe. Had they changed slightly, you would end up with this, which is why the atheist wants an infiniverse and us playing poker, which he doesn't believe in. So what does that mean? That means whatever created Agent X, remember we're writing our list of all the characteristics. What's the fourth characteristic? Agent X is knowledgeable enough to create a fine-tuned universe and not make a big collapse. Okay. Number 3, this is a fun one. The universe seems to be designed for discovery. Let me explain what I mean by that. Scientific discovery. Earth seems to be in a very special location that seems to allow scientific discovery, and the characteristics of the Earth allow for scientific discovery. Let me give you some of the characteristics. For instance, the equations that define the universe reduce to simple, humanly comprehensible equations. There's no natural requirement for this. Why are the equations of the universe so simple? Like E equal to mc squared. Why is it so elegant? In fact, most scientists and physicists know that the universe equations are going to be elegant. Now, E equal mc squared is a simplification. And by the way, it also allows us to know that we're getting close to the right answer. If we come up with a really complicated equation that has all the stuff in it, we're like, something's wrong here. There's a simpler answer, because our experience is that these equations are simple. So for instance, when I was at Oregon State, I used to walk around with a T-shirt that said this. Maxwell's laws of equations, it said this, and then it says, and then God said, let there be light. No, actually it says, and then God said, and it says these equations, and then it says, and there was light, right? Now, what is this? These are Maxwell's equations for electromagnetic radiation, which is light, right? My degree was in solid-state physics. So, but if you look at this actually ends up being in a very elegant matrix. You can't see it, but if we put it in a matrix, if you're an engineer, you'll say, oh yeah, that's a very elegant, Maxwell's equation was a beautiful matrix. Well, what they did, so that's the first one. Second thing is that we have a transparent atmosphere. Why do we have a transparent atmosphere? Many planets either have no atmosphere or have an opaque atmosphere, like Saturn or Jupiter, right? There's no requirement for life to have a transparent atmosphere. Life could have evolved, right, if it was going to evolve, with an opaque atmosphere. Why do we have a transparent atmosphere? Why do these evolved, randomly accidental creatures need to see the stars? What's so special about the stars? Well, but there is a requirement for life to have radiation protective atmosphere, but we have a transparent atmosphere. This allowed early scientists and amateurs to actually see way out there and study cosmology. Why would we need to study cosmology? I'll tell you in a few minutes. Okay. This is our location in the spiral arm. See, that's where you are. If I move my head, you'll see my head move right there. So that's our location in the Milky Way galaxy, right? Now, why are we in that location? I mean, look how big that is, right? That's billions of light years across, right? Why is it so big? Why are we just precisely in that location? Well, too low or too deep or too close to interior stars, we'd never be able to see past our own galaxy to discover the Big Bang. If we didn't have a transparent atmosphere and we were in a different location, we'd never have discovered the Big Bang. Why? For instance, this is our closest nebula, Sharpless 216, right? This is the Tarantula Nebula. Let's say we were as close to the Tarantula Nebula as we were to Sharpless 216. Let's say tomorrow you walk out and there's Sharpless on the sky, but suddenly it turned out that the Earth was actually closer to Tarantula. You'd walk out and you'd see this. You'd see shadows at midnight. You'd never be able to see past that to see the Doppler shift in stars. Everything would be too bright. Okay, let's look at who's the silly patent clerk from Switzerland? You're not allowed to. Einstein, good answer. No. I thought he'd know it, but I figured you'd know it too. But so there's this guy in Switzerland, and he says, I have a theory. The theory is that if you take a very heavy object and you pass a light around it, the gravitational force of the heavy object will make the light curve. They're like, well, how big an object? Oh, like a house? No. Like a mountain? No. I need an object like the sun. You mean as big as the sun? Yeah, light won't curve unless I have this huge heavy object. Okay, well, how do we prove your theory? Well, prove your theory is right if I can see a star that is behind the sun, but it looks like it's to the right of the sun. Oh, okay, I guess that would prove your theory. But you've got a problem here. We need just the right size object to cover the sun. It can't be inside our atmosphere, it has to be outside our atmosphere because otherwise the refraction won't work, right? So, too big and we see only black. Too small and it's too bright to see anything else. Too far away and our calculations are imprecise. We need something exactly the same size to cover the sun. We need something exactly the right ratios. And the only way you could cover the sun with something that was smaller than the sun is it had to be just as close as it was to us in the same ratio as the sun is distant from us. That's called the moon. You'd need a moon that's just about the right ratios. Now, guess what? The moon's about 400 times smaller and 400 times closer than the sun. Why is this important? This is important because no other galaxy, no other star system, no other solar system has any planets that we have ever discovered that has this ratio, not 400, just any ratio that would cover its single star perfectly like this. Now, it can't cover it too much because then you won't be able to see the star. So you see the star, right? See the stars back there on the side? Those stars are actually behind the sun. But the light has made them causes them to wrap around. The gravitational force has made it to bend around the sun. So it looks like it's the side, but it's actually behind. Guess what this did? When they figured this out, who became an overnight celebrity? Einstein. Because everybody's like, no, this is not going to work. Oh, your theory doesn't work. Oh, you're just a patent clerk. Who knows about you? Yeah, whatever. Overnight sensation. During the First World War, too, mind you. And he was in Germany. He was considered German and took a British guy to do the experiment. Stars not where they seemed or were calculated to be, but nobody need worry. Why? And then Einstein goes on later on what? To basically prove the Big Bang Theory and do all the calculations of theory of relativity. Somebody wants us to find the Big Bang. Okay, I'd get this objection. Oh, objection, but we could have verified the theory of relativity some other way. Yes, but when you add it to the transparent atmosphere, the location of the spiral arm, the fact that it moves away from the Earth, and all the other details, things started to seem less random. We were finding guns and motives and blue eyes suddenly everywhere. So, number 5, Agent X characteristics, wants us to discover him using science. No requirement, wants us to discover. Okay, let's look at the last one. There are dimensions, and this is the one where I blow a few minds. So stay with me. It's not difficult to understand, it's just difficult to believe. Everything I'm about to say is scientifically accurate. There are some scientific theories that vary on it, but it is scientifically accurate. 10 dimensions. For brief moments after the Big Bang, there were 10 dimensions, if not more. These dimensions disappeared to our senses after 10 to the minus 23 seconds. That's a Planck's constant second after. So we have the Big Bang, there are 10 dimensions, and boom, suddenly the 10 dimensions disappear, and all that are left are 4. Now, you know 3 of them, height, length, and width. What's the 4th dimension? Time is the 4th dimension. It's half a dimension, because you can only go forward in it, you can't go back in it. Notwithstanding Back to the Future and all those great movies, but the reality is you can't go backwards or jump in time. You can go forward in time faster, you can go forward in time slower, but you can't go forward in time and jump time. So the 4th dimension is time. So you're going, wait a minute. What are you saying? Well, at the Big Bang, there was a 4th spatial dimension. Up, down, left, right, forward, backwards, and another one. In fact, another 6. What? Here's a video that kind of explains what it's like on a 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional, and then we'll extrapolate.
Welcome to Flatland, a world of only 2 dimensions. only forwards and backwards, left and right. In this world, there is no up and no down.
I said to Ray, "Where's Dottie?" He said, "Well, she's out in line." I said,
What the bleep is that thing? Huh?
In this world, the two-dimensional beings that live here have no concept of three-dimensional objects. These two-dimensional flatlanders have no understanding of cubes, spheres, tetrahedrons, or yours truly. From their 2D perspective, my 3D finger looks something like this.
What the bladder is that?
Hello, little circle. Fear of the unknown, or should I say, not yet known. It's a puzzle. If we see only what we know, how does anyone ever see anything new? The unknown, how do we ever get out of our box? Hello, little circle. Don't be afraid.
Who said that? Where are you?
This is always the tricky part to explain. I'm in another dimension, another space. I am above you.
Never use that word.
What word?
The A word.
Above?
It's forbidden.
Well, what do you think it means?
I don't know. And I don't want to know. You can be severely punished if you use that word. Are you a ghost?
I hope not. I just have a different perspective than you do. I can see things in a way you can't yet.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Well, okay, you have a safe hidden in your pantry. And inside it, you have 12 coins, a will, and a passport.
How did you know that? What are you? Are you a god?
Well, nope. You see, since I am above you, in the third dimension, I can see inside things in your world.
Third dimension? You are a crazy ghost. There's only two. Look.
So, if I were to touch the inside of your stomach, how would I do that?
Well, you'd have to cut through my skin. Otherwise, it's impossible. Stop! Stop!
Ready for more?
More what?
Dimensions.
Oh,
Directions.
no. Yes, but there aren't any. More? What will happen to me? What will I become?
You'd have to become it to know.
Okay.
Excellent.
I never knew.
Isn't it funny? That which we are most afraid of is what thrills us the most.
Dimensions, directions. So At the point of the Big Bang, there were 10 dimensions. 6 more, 10 spatial dimensions. So 6 more than we have right now, right? So, wait. What does that mean? How do I don't even have trouble comprehending it. Okay. Well, here's a 3-dimensional cube, right? I can unfold this cube into 2 dimensions, right? So that becomes this. A 2-dimensional being would not be able to comprehend the cube in figure 1, right? But once I unfold it, they'll be able to comprehend the cube in figure 6. So, what if there was a 4-dimensional cube? By the way, it's called a hypercube, right? Or a tesseract, if you ever heard that name. Now, if you take the tesseract, you take the hypercube, it's in 4 dimensions. Well, what would it look like? Well, there's some things we can figure out because they're all in ratio. So a square is a 2-dimensional cube, right? A cube is a 3-dimensional cube. So if I take a square and I unfold it, I get what? I get a square, it's 2-dimensional. Then how many sides are there? 4 sides, and each side is a line, right? Now, if I have a 3-dimensional cube, which is your standard cube, it's a cube, it's 3-dimensional. It has how many sides? 6 sides, and each side is a square. So if I had a 4-dimensional cube, it's called a hypercube, it's in 4 dimensions. How many sides would it have? 8, right? You're just going up by 2, because each dimension adds 2 more. And if a square has a line and a cube has a square, what kind of side will a hypercube have? A cube, right? Now, so we can imagine, well, we can't really well, but we can imagine that there's a hypercube or tesseract, and we unfold it, because we can't see it as a 4-dimensional cube, because we are only in 3 dimensions. But we could unfold it into 3 spatial dimensions, and we could figure out what that looks like, right? So what would an unfolded hypercube look like? You ready? Right? 8 cubes. Those are the 8 sides. Well, yeah, but how does it fold back up? Well, we have no idea. But we know how it unfolds, right? If we could imagine it folded up, then we'd be great. But we may be able to get some glimpse of it. We can draw a shadow. So here's a cube, right? It's 2-dimensional. It's a 3-dimensional cube, but drawn in 2 dimensions. And if I look at that, I know because of the perspective, I know those 2 sides are actually the same size. They're just the way of perspective. And if I were to take something and I rotate it around, every time I could see one full side, it would be a square, right? So if I were to take a hypercube and I were to rotate it, now remember, just like this is a 2-dimensional, we're really just seeing the shadow of it. So if I were to take a hypercube and rotate it into our space, I should see a cube. I rotate it, I should see the other cube and the other cube and the other cube, and it would look like this. There's a cube. There's a cube. There's a cube. And you're like, wait, but I don't, yeah, you're just seeing the shadow. You don't know what it looks like in entirety because it's a multi-dimensional. It's 1 dimension above you, right? Now, let's go a step further. Here is a circle. When I bring the circle through, it's a circle, it's 2-dimensional. When I bring it through a 1-dimensional, it hits that, let's say that's a line. It hits the line, and then it expands to the width of that circle, right? So a 1-dimensional creature, such thing could exist, it would say, oh, I just see a dot, and it grows into this big wide thing. Okay, now let's take a 3-dimensional sphere, a ball, right? And I start passing it through to a 2-dimensional. So a 2-dimensional creature wants to understand what a ball looks like, because it only knows circles. Well, guess what? It would first, when it comes in, right, it sees, when the ball hits the table, the flat plane, it'll see the dot. And then it'll sink through until it gets to the full size of the circle, and then it'll sink through until it grows to the full size of the circle, and it'll shrink down to a dot and disappear, right? Okay, so this is what you're looking at, right? So you're looking at the red slice is the 2-dimensional slice. It hits, you see a dot, it grows to the full size of the circle, of the sphere, and then shrinks back down. All the time I'm seeing a 2-dimensional representation of that, right? If I add that all up in my mind, I could know it, right? Well, what would happen if I took a 4-dimensional sphere and brought it into our plane? Okay? So here's, on the side you have a 3-dimensional one, intersecting a 2-dimensional. On the 4-dimensional, this is what you'd see. Ready? You would see it pop out, and then it would shrink down, but it's a sphere. It's shrinking down as a sphere. Because remember, when we see a circle, a three-dimensional representation of interaction of a four-dimensional would be a sphere. So you will see the sphere shrinks back down, and then it grows back up into a sphere. This one, see how it does that? So in other words, if somebody had a four-dimensional sphere brought into our space, I'd see a dot, I'd see a small sphere, it would grow to the full size of the sphere in 4 dimensions, and it would shrink back down and then would disappear. And the whole time it would look like it was flying. There's nothing below it, nothing above it, nothing around it. See that? Now, why is this important? What's it mean? What's a wall to a two-dimensional being? It's a line, right? So if I had a wall and you were a two-dimensional being, you couldn't get past that wall. In fact, if I had 4 walls and I had a room inside, you couldn't get into that room. And if I put a door, I could put a little door, and you as a two-dimensional being couldn't get over the lines, you'd have to get into that room through the door. And if I locked the door, you couldn't get in. But I come along and I say, oh, yeah, you guys are restricted by the line. I'm just going to hop over the line because I'm a three-dimensional being. How did Jesus get into the upper room? He stepped over the wall. Angels and demons. Are they up or down, below or above? Multidimensional. The Bible explains this specifically. What an angel comes, it intersects with our space. What's the first thing people, it comes in and there's a shimmering, and then you see this weird thing, and then you see the angel, and then the angel shimmers and disappears again. The whole time it looks like it's flying. And what's the first thing people say? Oh, how beautiful. No, what do? They scream and they fall on their fear. And the first thing the angel says, do not fear. Because something weird just happened. And they intersected our plane and they left our plane. Where is heaven and hell? Other dimensions. Right? If heaven and hell are in this universe, they're in other dimensions. In the new universe, there will be a heaven. Where's the hell? In this, again, same universe, multiple dimensions. And then this one that I always get atheists on, and I get a lot of Christians on. You don't have a soul/spirit. Like what? Like, no, you don't have a soul. Nobody here has a soul. Why? You don't have a soul. You are a soul. What you have is a body. Your soul is this multidimensional entity. Now, it's tied very closely to your body. We're not Gnostics, right? We're not into, oh yeah, you're separate. No, it's tied to your body in a certain way. But when you die, I was talking to this atheist who had cancer, and we have if you look for Truman and Neil Mommon, you'll find it. We have a whole bunch of debates on it. And he had cancer, and I went to visit with him, and he'd heard this theory, and he says, so you think that when I die, I don't die, just my body dies? I said, yeah. So it's like a car. You're driving around the car. When you park the car's dead, but you just got out of the car. And he says, so you think my car is breaking down? I said, absolutely. I think the car is breaking down with cancer. As far as I know, he never became a Christian. It was the last time I saw him. And I kept trying to reach out to him, but his email wasn't being answered, and I didn't have his wife's email. So you don't have a soul or a spirit. It's because you are a soul/spirit. And somewhere in our body is the interface to the eternal, the supernatural. What's it like to die? When you die, you are released from this 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional existence, and you enter a 10-dimensional existence. You go out to eat. Maybe you went out to eat before you came. You ate your dinner in 3 dimensions in time. Imagine a 10-dimensional dinner. Women, 10-dimensional chocolate. You see colors now. three-dimensional colors in time. Imagine 10-dimensional colors. You hear music now in 3 dimensions. And then we hear it in 10 dimensions. We see through a glass, through a mirror darkly. And then God reveals it to us. All right, Neil, but this is not in the Bible. This is the only time I'm going to quote the Bible. Then the king of Aram sent horses and chariots and strong forces. They went by night and surrounded the city. And the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning. An army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Oh, no, my Lord, what shall we do? The servant asked. Don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed, open up his eyes, Lord, so that he may see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills for the horses and the chariots of fire all around Elisha. He got a vision of the 10 dimensions. Who can hide in secret places so I cannot see them, declares the Lord. Do I not fill the heaven and the earth? God did this so they would seek him and perhaps reach out to him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. How can God be not far from any one of us? If you're a 2-dimensional creature and you're living on this, I can be closer to you as a 3-dimensional creature, and you may not even know it. God can be in us and within us, and the Holy Spirit can be within us. Of course, we'll know it if the Holy Spirit's in us. It also explains demon possession. Demons controlling the unsaved. Oh, Neil, says the atheist, but this is all science fiction. No, you see, they built a Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, spent $3 billion building it. What? To find and send an alpha particle into the 5th dimension. This is science, my friends. Real science. And it's not new. See this picture before? Salvador Dali, 1954. I never liked Salvador Dali. I thought it was weird until I read his explanation of this. This is called Corpus Hypercubus, crucifixion. You see the cross that Jesus is hung on? It's a hypercube, unfolded hypercube. And if you read Dali's notes, he says, Christ died for all men in all dimensions. Okay. Why is this important, though? This is because this means that Agent X must be outside of time and space, inside of the universe. In the video, that being would not be God, because that being was in the dimensions. God is outside the dimensions. In the video, those dimensions are the natural dimensions to that creature. To us, the natural dimensions are the 3 dimensions plus time. What is the supernatural dimensions? The other 6. Remember I said you can't leave here today and say that there is no supernatural, because science says there is a supernatural. It calculates the supernatural at the point of the Big Bang. The Big Bang is one of the most powerful witnesses to the gospel and the creation of the universe and to God's existence and anything we've ever seen before. So prior to singularity, time and space do not exist, nor do these other dimensions. So whatever caused the singularity did so outside and previous to time and space in any dimensions existing. It's not multidimensional, it's not supernatural, it's extra-dimensional, it's extra-natural. God is not supernatural, he's extra-natural. Supernatural is just limited to those 6 dimensions. Extra-natural means it's outside and within and everything. Now here's the key point. Remember this? Matter needs time, time needs energy, energy needs matter. You can't have one without the other. Sounds like a song. How does it go? Never mind, thank you. Well, see, I'm from India. They don't believe that. We have arranged marriages there. It's marriage and then love. It comes after it anyway. But anyway, my parents tried. Believe me, it didn't work. I had to do it the tough way. I'd find the most beautiful woman in America and ask her to marry me. I told you that, right? Okay, so here's why this is important. Agent X is not made of matter, right? And does not need energy, and is not constrained by time. So Agent X is not material or physical. And it's interesting when I do this, because I'll be sitting there. In fact, I did recent radio show on Epoch Times, and the guy said, okay, what's your argument? Because, he's a Christian, but he says, you're a scientist, so what's your argument about God existing? I said, quite simply, you need matter, time, and energy all together. You can't have one without the other. And they all came into being at the point of the Big Bang. He says, yes, okay, great. I said, okay, so whatever created the universe cannot be composed of matter, time, or energy. Cannot be composed of matter, does not need energy, and is not constrained by time. I go, yes. Okay, so if you're not, and I'll finish the argument here. So isn't that what the Bible says? So here's what, let me finish the argument just right now. So what's the last thing? Agentic is not constrained by time or space because it caused time or space and space. So the 4 points led us to this 6 points. Everybody with me so far? Now let's look at the characteristics of God. Is this a quantum fluctuation? Is this some unknown agent that has no mind? Well, powerful enough to create the universe, that we call that, by the way, what do we call it? Something that's powerful enough to create the universe. Omnipotent. Not constrained by time or space, because it caused time or space. That means it is in every moment in time and in every spot in space. We call that omnipresent. Okay? Knowledgeable enough to create a fine-tuned universe. We call that omniscient. Wants us to discover him using science. We call that personal. Has a free will, or exists. Eternal and uncreated. Non-mechanistic, we call that, has free will and a mind. Now, if I take those two, eternal, uncreated, has free will, omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, personal, I don't know about you, Mr. Atheist, but this is personally what I define as God. Now, did I use the Bible at any point in this to prove any of my points? All from science. Nothing I said here can the atheists disagree with the science. They might disagree with the conclusion, but they can disagree with the facts. And now they have to prove the logic is wrong. And I've had atheists go back and forth, and I'm like, no, you missed the argument. Here's the argument, I'll state it again, and then they'll miss it. I'll state it again, and they'll miss it. Right? People like Anthony Flew, he became a deist when he saw the evidence for the fine-tuning. So it's a very powerful argument. But we end up with this, where did Agent X, God, come from? What was before God? Now remember this, everything which has a beginning has a cause, anything that exists forever needs no cause, right? Prior to singularity, time and space do not exist, right? Agent X created time, Agent X created space. Thus God is outside of space and God is outside of time. So when somebody says, what was before God? The answer is, this is a stupid question. Why? Because there was no before God created time. The word before has no meaning. And where did God come from? Again, a stupid question. There was no from before God created space and matter. The word from has no meaning. I play a game with I'll ask you this question again in the series. I say, where does God go? Can God go anywhere? And the answer is no, he can't go anywhere because he's everywhere. Where do you go when you're everywhere? Nowhere. By the way, that's just one of the Big Bangs. There's 14 Big Bangs. Besides the Big Bang of the universe, there's the first one. There are 13 others. The Big Bang of life. Atheists can't explain where life came from. The Big Bang of morality. Where did morality? The moral argument. The Big Bang of free will, right? How can we have free will? Atheists have to actually accept the fact that we don't have free will. In fact, Frank Turek always has fun with this. Frank's the funniest guy I know. If you've listened to him, he's great. You should go on and look up Frank Turek. He was just here recently. Frank's a good friend of mine. We've known each other for, 15 years now. And I wrote a book, Jesus Involved Politics. I stole a whole chapter from him. I'm like, Frank, I'm seeing this chapter. He goes, go for it. The Big Bang of morality. He talks about that, and he says, look, you can't, atheists are borrowing moral capital from us, and we'll talk about it as we go on. The Big Bang of free will, and that's the point I was going to make. Frank mocks this atheist. He says, he quotes this guy that says, there is no free will, it's just an illusion of whatever. And atheist says, why should I trust you? You had no free will in writing that statement. Even if it was wrong, you would still have to write it. So why would I believe you, right? The free will of consciousness, sentience. Where did we get our consciousness? How do we know? What sentience? The Big Bang of reason and rationality. Why is the world rational? Why does reason work? The Big Bang of Christ and resurrection. We'll talk about this. The Big Bang of the complexity of life forms, meaning not evolution. How come there's so much life forms and evolution can explain it? The Big Bang of truth. It turns out that we don't have time to go to this, but I have a whole talk where I do that. Evolution actually does not arrive at truth. You can believe the wrong thing, because evolution is survival of the fittest. You can believe a lie and still survive as long as it's a better lie than the last lie you had that wouldn't let you survive, but you didn't arrive at truth. In fact, they did a study in the University of San Diego to show that evolution cannot arrive at truth. It just arrives at something that allows you to survive. The Big Bang of appearance of intelligence. Why does everything look intelligently designed? Or the Big Bang of the biblical test is having to be able to predict the Big Bang. How did the Bible predict the Big Bang in Job, in Psalms, and in Genesis? The Big Bang of language. Languages all seem to pop up. We have our languages and we have the proto-languages. But all the proto-languages just appeared out of nowhere. Why? Where did they come from? Well, we know where it came from. It came from the Tower of Babel, right? But why in history those languages just pop up, fully formed, fully functional? They're just there. The Big Bang of transcendent arts, logic, mathematics, set theory. Why does logic make sense? Why does mathematics set theory? Why does set theory make sense? These are the transcendent arts. And finally, the Big Bang of science and ability to prove certain things that we know to be true. Science can't prove science. You can't take the scientific method. That's why you have to have a philosophy of science. You can't use the scientific method to prove the scientific method is a valid conclusion. You have to assume the scientific method makes sense, because then you have to bring in reason. Well, it makes sense, reason. Yeah, you're using reason there, right? So the science can't prove science. That's number one. Science can't prove things that we take to be obvious. Like, for instance, you can't prove in science that you're really sitting here and not in the Matrix thinking you're sitting here. Those of you who have not seen the Matrix won't understand the reference, but it's a movie about these guys who are all programmed. They're actually in a machine plugged in, thinking that the world is out there, but it really isn't. You can't prove that you weren't put here 10 minutes ago with the appearance of age and experience. You were just programmed, but you just weren't here 10 minutes ago. But we know that's stupid. So how does science disprove that? No, we can't. It's just something else that's in there. So there's all these 14 Big Bangs. So let me wrap it up today. We've done the second one is prove the New Testament. Next week, or the week after that, we're going to prove the New Testament is accurate using archaeology and manuscript evidence. No science. So don't get scared. This was the toughest of all of them. And then we'll prove Jesus really existed. And then we'll explain why Christ had to die and why we must find sin, and explain how God can exist when there's evil in the world. I do have a few books in the back if you want. Just let me know. I'll pull them out. My son will go pull them out. We also have a kid's book, which I didn't bring, that just kind of explains how the universe can't create itself. And then I'll wrap it up with this. If God is outside of time, by the way, just so you know, this is C.S. Lewis's, I'm going to read C.S. Lewis. But modern day philosophers think that God had to put himself within time when he created it. So he limited himself in time. But this is still a good thought experiment. If God is outside time, he can listen to all 6 billion of our prayers at the same time. He can tend to each one of us individually. C.S. Lewis says, suppose I'm writing a novel. I write, Mary laid down her work. Next moment came a knock at the door. For Mary who has to live in the imaginary time of my story, there's no interval between putting down the work and hearing the knock. But I, who am Mary's maker, do not live in that imaginary time at all. Between the first half of that sentence and the second, I might sit down for 3 hours and think steadily about Mary. I could think about Mary if she were the only character in the book and for as long as I pleased, and the hours I spent in doing so would not appear in Mary's time, the time inside the story at all. Meaning that when you pray, God is only paying attention to you. Of undivided attention. And when you sing, God is listening to your solo concert to him. You're like, oh no. God is paying attention to you individually because he can do that. Let's wrap this up. If God is outside of time and space, asking that you find God in creation is like Hamlet running about on stage, expecting to find Shakespeare somewhere in the props. The only way Hamlet could find Shakespeare is if Shakespeare had written himself into the play. Yet, through the Old Testament, through Christ, and by creating the world for discovery and science, God has done exactly that. Thank you very much. Questions? If you have any questions, what time is it? I didn't even see the clock. Over there.